mean, I do hope we find time for Q&A. I think it'll be interesting. It's about an hour. So, yeah. Well, let me decide. Well, thank you. I think we can start. Thank you all for coming to one of the last panels of Forum 2000. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've seen happen in artificial intelligence world of policy, and then we will open the floor with our panelists to hear what they have to say, what they've experienced, of the impact of AI on their work in their respective countries. So in 2018, two international organizations, namely Access Now and Amnesty International, launched what is called the Toronto Declaration on Human Rights and Artificial Intelligence. The declaration, endorsed by other international stakeholders, addressed the risk of human rights harms associated with this technology, particularly regarding the right to equality and non-discrimination. More specifically, the declaration set out tangible means of upholding equality and non-discrimination and clarifying the obligations of states and responsibilities of companies to protect human rights in the development and use of machine learning, this technology that was feeding the machine learning, emphasizing the importance of accountability for human rights harms and the importance of access to effective remedy to those who suffer human rights harms in the context of machine learning systems. Now, as the description of our panel notes, there are more or less two separate streams on the present and the future of AI. Those who advocate for the use of technology in all spheres of our lives, and those who are more concerned and therefore cautious with just how much, how fast, and how accessible it can or should be. My observations thus far is that those who are calling for regulations, guidelines, and some kind of framework around AI technology are largely civic groups, organizations working on data privacy, digital security organizations, or internet freedom organizations, and movements that focus on digital rights. While those who see it as a magic solution to many of the problems are largely businesses, corporations, governments, and companies that have their own stakes in the pie. In the case of the latter, we are certainly not seeing right-centering policy that would ensure AI and machine-assisted learning and decisions to not harm human rights. As such, having accountability measures in place is imperative. There's also the European Union's AI Act that many advocates for greater transparency and accountability have worked on, and which is yet to be adopted. The AI Act's Article 6 is one of major concerns, especially for the EU member states, because it basically would allow developers of AI-driven systems, AI technologies, to decide for themselves if they believe the system is high risk, which effectively means that the same company that would be subject to the law has actually given power to unilaterally decide whether or not it should apply to the company itself. Now, we need to know how AI is used in regulating online content, just as we need to know what personal data is used to enhance machine learning capabilities. Think local facial recognition, for instance. Or as Daniel Lufer, the man behind AI Myth Project, describes it on the website of the project, and I highly recommend for any of you to actually go and visit the website. It's really great. And I quote, "With every genuine advance in the field of artificial intelligence, we see a parallel increase in hype, myths, misconceptions, and inaccuracies. These misunderstandings contribute to the opacity of the AI systems, rendering them magical, inscrutable, and inaccessible in the eyes of the public." So why don't we kick off our conversation with your respective views on this hype around AI and how it really affects your work in the context of your work. And Violeta, especially from you, I would be really interested to hear whether this EU Act has been discussed in the business sphere of countries that you work in. So I'll kick it off, and perhaps we start with you, Xiao.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I teach and doing research at School of Information and UC Berkeley. I also found and run a website, news website about China, study China's internet censorship, but also following closely on the development of what I call the digital authoritarianism. This fascinating but extremely important question of AI. Let me start to share some of the researchers' at this point, general view, or you can say it's from me, and actually I discussed with some other research colleagues in my university. Let's just say if we use a general definition of AI, machine learning, that in the age of large data, big data, we talk about surveillance technology, we're talking about the facial recognition, and those topics has been around for a while. Particularly in the case of China's fast-growing the surveillance industry, and both domestic implementation of surveillance technology and the exportation to the rest of the world is already a serious concern for people interested in human rights, democracy, and actually global order. But now, in the past 6 months or almost a year, we have a new wave of what we call generative AI, ChatGPT, middleware, what's not. This much new interest on generative AI, I want to share a couple of things with all of you. First is we should look at this AI as a new form of collective intelligence. Really, it is starting from the internet connected with everyone when the information is starting to generated by the users and by content generators. Think of Wikipedia and every website. And fast forward to the technology, machine learning, algorithm developed until now. This generative AI is really on the shoulder of human knowledge, but with the capacity of computing power, of absorbing all of them. And this is fascinating and also scary. It empowers us, but also can disempower us. It has many sort of advanced advantage, but it also has some serious, sometimes very silly and stupid mistakes. We do not fully understand this new wave of generative AI very well. It may democratize a lot of the content generation, maybe the use of art, but also you can think of internet soon becoming an archive of automatically generated contents. Not so much of the human efforts already. Let me say maybe one more thing, which is treat AI as a new type of intelligent species. But this species is going to work with human on every front for serving for different agenda, different political ideology. It depends on how you use it, who you use it, and in what situation you use it. The AI also has a limit, but it's also vastly, fastly advancing. Right now, what we're looking at this generative AI is what we call the large language model. Only few large companies can possibly have that computing power and harness the data and train such model. That type of concentration of power is also scary. That's why we're talking about the regulation, we're talking about the transparency, etc. However, with the technology advances, that's not necessarily always the case. Maybe we can democratize the AI, their models. It doesn't have to be only the huge companies which their huge capital and computation capacity to do this. But in order for the general industry to develop to that direction, that requires government effort, requires regulation, requires you shifting the entire industry away from the current business model. So these are the serious discussions. I'll have more time maybe to say a few more things about China, but then I'll come back maybe later discussion. In the case of China, the generative AI have a very interesting impact, which is, on the one hand, the government wants to have its own generative AI because they cannot trust the AI model, language model trained by Western companies. However, because of the censorship and political restriction, the likelihood of Chinese tech companies, despite their financial power and technology power, to train a very competent and well-used language model is really questionable. In other words, the political censorship and restriction hindered China's capacity to advance its own large language model AI. Furthermore, if the technology develop, as I said, that those large language model can be generated in a much more smaller size on the computer. You know, some AI experts said it could be just on a USB disk. If we really get to that point, it will be really interesting to see the Chinese current censorship to filter on the internet will be seriously challenged by this new distributional hardware of a language model among the Chinese users, which they can have access to common sense or some of the knowledge bases, at least not a current Chinese censorship can deal with. So finally, I don't want to say we have great hope or we're all having a great danger. But I do want to say this is a time that to look at the AI and impact to every front, particularly to political and social life that we're all concerned, is a very, very urgent issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what you mentioned on democratizing AI is a fascinating idea, and I would like to come back to it, especially in the context of recent events of the last week. But Eduardo, I actually want to jump to you and have you actually speak a little bit to what is happening in Latin America, because also in our exchange ahead of this panel, you mentioned how it's a risk factor.
Well, Latin America is a diverse continent with many different capabilities for technology and development. For instance, we have Brazil, which is a leader in many industries, and then we have countries like mine. Our only input to the development of artificial intelligence has been the names that Meta has decided to give to some of their models. Llama, alpaca, vicuña, those are Peruvian animals. So I think that shows our participation in the development of artificial intelligence is quite limited. But we have been part of this whole digital transformation that the world has been experienced since the middle 90s, as almost any other country in the world. And we have some lessons learned from that it's easier to get consultants telling you what to do to support businesses, not necessarily Peruvian businesses, but than to find experts that can shape public policy around Peruvian needs. For instance, we already have a law promoting the use of artificial intelligence in government, which basically appears to be a sort of byproduct of a guy who watched Minority Report and started to dream about how the state can use that for any purpose. While at the same time, nobody has started to think about how this is going to increase the inequalities that abound in my country. Because there's this image you have provided us, having AI on a USB. I will probably get one of those very easily in the future, but most of my colleagues in the university system in Peru won't, for a number of reasons, including language and so on. So that's one of the issues I think it's quite concerning for democratic development, because this is going to increase, in most of the countries of the world, it's going to increase inequalities that shape our democratic systems, because democracy can survive when it doesn't provide some kind of results. That's one of the things we've been discussing during these 2 days. Democracy demands of the people have to be listened to and have to be taken into account by democratic systems. And AI is going to offer us a wonderful opportunity to increase inequalities. And the ones who are already connected to the world, so to speak, are going to be better connected and going to have more opportunities, while the rest of my compatriots aren't. And it has to do with the nature of AI as it exists, which is a business. It hasn't been thought of as anything else as, for instance, Meta designed Facebook many years ago and so on. They are businesses that are trying to increase opportunities for them, and they don't think about the effects they have on different societies. And that's the kind of discussion we should be having, how to at least compensate for the businesses which are driving these developments. Because even interesting, as has been mentioned, there's decisions by the European Commission to promote regulation that leaves all the regulatory powers in the hands of the businesses. Yeah. It's the same with the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. In fact, they are dealing with this as an economic issue. It's not a public issue.
It's not a human rights issue.
And in the end, all the consequences, all the byproducts of these decisions are going to affect the rest of the world. Latin America, Africa, most of Asia, and so on. So I think that's the focus from a democratic perspective, is how to promote a different approach to the settlement around digital technology as a whole, and specifically in this case about AI. Because it's the same thing since 1995. This train is running completely freely across the world, changing everything, and nobody can say a thing.
It reminds me a lot of the conversation on digital security, because for many years now, there's been this conversation on speaking and training on holistic digital security. And this is what I think of AI as well, that we're forgetting this holistic approach to AI, or it's more or less not as much at the forefront of discussion as it should be. Titika, maybe you can then speak to from the information operation perspective in your line of work, and then we go back to the company representative on the panel.
Hi everyone, I'm Titika from Doublethink Lab. We are starting in 2019 in Taiwan, and we mostly focus on the China influence operation in general, and our team has dedicated another tech force to tracking the propaganda and disinformation, information operation online, especially on the China part. So, and since very beginning, we've been developing, try to adopting machine learning technology to doing our research. For instance, like right now, for instance, like the first project we did for that is that we try to scribing a lot of China state media article. They are all their narrative. Then we use the machine learning algorithm to compare that group of the data with Japan, Taiwan, or Australia, other Chinese news, and see which news media outlets pretty align, always align their narrative in terms of like war choosing, framing bias or coverage bias. For instance, some media outlets, they will never cover anything about the Uyghurs, even they are not in China. The same technology now can help us to scan the Twitter account at once and find out who is always tweeting China narrative, state media narrative. Then we can very easily to find the source of the account. For instance, we can find the Twitter account, they tweet averagely 240 times per day, and everything they tweet is about China's, how great China is and how bad Western country is. I grew up as a programmer, actually. The first time that I tried to programming is when I was 10. The computer is still black and white. I can tell you something that the generative AI I tried last year since Midjourney start. I never see anything like this, like a ChatGPT or generative AI. It's so good, and it's nobody else was expected that would be so good like this one. And what we are predicting is that it's inevitable. Because most of the tech company is trying to adopt some technology for generative AI. It's inevitable that our life will be facing the generative AI in every aspect. Soon you can walk into a room and speak like, I want to be in California Beach. Then the VR generated the environment, 3D, sounds, image, everything, then you feel like you are inside that, right? So at the very beginning, we are very worried about how China government or other authoritarian regime will use those technology for information manipulation. And funny is that so far we found a very limited cases from that front. And instead, we found that they are so focus on how to make those generative AI political correct, which is technically very, very hard. So there's been a lot of Chinese version of the generative AI, ChatGPT, try to be pushed and be banned soon after. And also the training data, the data they are used for training. If it's from within, it's already be censored, already be curated environment like China or those country, that would be very limited for the language model to be accurate. But also that created a lot of other problem, right? So we can talk about some potential solution later. But what I'm saying that is the main problem is that it's lower the cost to make fake, and also increase the volume. And making fact check or making the truth is already very costly. And I think instead of we try to figure out how we restrict the AI technology to expand it or to be misused, we should also think about how we make it, the truth and the fact more lower cost, more fast to be produced. Because what we be really troubling is that the cost for the truth, to produce the truth. Yes. I will stop here first, then we can talk about other aspects later.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that worrying, especially with ChatGPT. I've used it myself, I confess. I was just really curious how it works, and I was really surprised when I used it, how well it worked. I mean, of course, it could do better, but for a machine to create a comprehensive 3 paragraphs on an issue, I was blown away, but extremely worried about the future of its usage. Now, coming to you, I mean, you've heard 3 different perspectives, very different contexts. What is happening in the business world about this hype, about regulations, about concerns by users, by clients? Maybe you can speak to that, Violeta.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I will start with 5 things to set the scene. The first one is that it's very hard to slow down today because AI is with us for a while, so it's not something new. I believe it got a lot of traction and attention with generative AI, which was a true leap. But actually it was used for a while. And it was used rather on autopilot type of mode. Imagine that in our news feed, in our search, even our autonomous robot, you know, the vacuum cleaner in the house was driven by AI. And we were not really like in control how it was working. So I believe that with generative AI and with the new co-pilot type of versions of AI, which are meant to augment our human capabilities, we are coming more towards having control, being in the driver's seat, how I'm calling it. And believe me, this is a design choice made by Microsoft, but definitely we are seeing a larger adoption, and I would expect that this will have a really strong impact. And I'm actually optimistic, like Xiao was saying, that it can democratize the AI adoption. So this would be rather point number one. The point number two, imagine we would have today here at Forum 2000, three of the greatest philosophers we had, Spinoza, Kant, Nietzsche. And we would ask them what they would do, having this dilemma, this challenge ahead of them. I can only imagine that maybe Kant, who created the critical imperative, would say that maximize the benefits, minimize the negative consequences. And I believe this we should do as a society, because AI regulation and policy making is not the task of some AI gurus and some policy makers. It is our all of us journey, and we are having a responsibility to play in it. So in order to move forward, it will require leadership, parties coming together, greater understanding, this holistic view, which Arzu was mentioning just before. It really is not a simple answer to a simple problem. It's very complex, and it will have a lot of implications in many aspects of our life. But I would say that instead of slowing down, maybe we should speed up the research and the coming together and take some decisions and adjust them and fine-tune on the way. Because the technology is still evolving, whatever policy we would put in place today, it won't solve the problem for maybe 6 months advancement. So it really requires like a continuous improvement approach and utilizing like strong principles going forward. The third thing, I truly believe, and this is beyond Microsoft speaking, who is really which is a driver of education. Personally, I believe that we should invest as much as in education, awareness, and upskilling of the population. You know that the world is what you make of it. We can utilize AI for bad purposes, and definitely they would be actors which will be utilizing in a let's say, negative kind of impact. But you can utilize in AI in such great applications with positive outcomes. And reflecting back on my experience in the last 6 months in Czech Republic and Slovakia, but not only in Central Eastern Europe as well, I'm seeing how AI is being utilized in healthcare system to support the doctors actually, to concentrate more on patients during the consultation, and then having a simple AI service integrated in the process, and then helping them to have accurate and fast reports, so they could spend 1 hour with the patient, not 20 minutes with the patient, and then 40 minutes writing whatever thing in 3 systems. So I see healthcare application. I see it in the education. Imagine we can utilize AI to create a tutor for each one of us. Each one of us are having, a different level of understanding and knowledge on different aspects. If we would utilize AI to help us understand our level and then curate the content and play with it, it would be absolutely great. I used ChatGPT at some point in order to see how I can pursue an aggressive discussion on AI, and I prompted the ChatGPT in this way. And actually you can utilize it to really educate and train yourself for various reasons. And again, it's about choices. And if we educate society to make the right choices, if we are applying the real values, because in the end, it really boils down to having informed people, having educated people, empowered people to, first of all, understand. The other aspect of AI which I've seen in our countries you can utilize AI to really help navigate complex environments. So imagine you have big corporations or big companies who are having a huge knowledge base, a lot of policies, a lot of procedures. You know, semantic search and synthesis can work a lot. In Ministry of Interior, we have conducted a couple of POCs which can serve better citizens in order to search for information and not providing them 10 links then with 150 pages to read from to understand what they would do in a certain situation. Actually, with generative AI behind, you can actually provide very crisp answers, and you can save time, and you can actually guide people. These are very concrete things. If I'm looking in the banking sector, it is very much used either in guiding the people, choosing the right products for themselves. Obviously, you can utilize even more in fraud prevention. You can utilize in security, kind of increasing the cyber resilience of the country. And I've seen projects and a lot of strong initiatives in Czech Republic and Slovakia to this respect. You can utilize it in production. You can utilize in agriculture. Our climate is really changing. We have less rain. We have more heat. You know, the way we are driving agriculture in the country won't stay the same. So it's really how we want to pursue it. It will make a difference. And I would give a history example again. I graduated economics, so I don't have a technical background, but I like to think that technology is a tool, is an enabler to what we want to achieve. So, printing press was invented in 1400, and it was invented in Germany. You know which were the countries they were utilizing and reading actually books more? It was not the Germans. It was Netherlands and UK, the Great Britain citizens, they were reading the most books in 1500. And actually, I think it's not about who is inventing what. It's about how you are adopting. It's not about, like in Shakespeare, in Hamlet, to be or not to be, to use or not to use. It's really about how to use, how to be. I think this is a fundamental thing we need to consider. And to your point on the regulation, I would prefer to focus on the things which are published and adopted and not on drafts. I know laws which had like 20 drafts. If I would have spent time to analyze the draft number 3 or number 7, probably wouldn't have been very effective. What I know it's effective is to have public consultation, being able to articulate what is important, in which areas, which is non-negotiable, and then to kind of pursue those goals, so to make sure that the policy is really safeguarding us.
Thank you so much for that. I really agree with you on the fact, on the question that you raise on how we, on the how, right? How you're adopting it, how you're using this technology, and the intention. But I'm still very much concerned on the feeding and the growth of this technology, because the way we use ChatGPT may not be the same as malign actors may be using ChatGPT. And that's where kind of the underlying dilemma of this technology becomes our concern as journalists, as rights defenders, as civic activists, is what kind of person is using it, with what intention, and with what kind of language it's feeding the algorithm, making it. Which I guess brings me to the next. I mean, I had 2 questions for us, but I also would like to hear from the audience. So perhaps we kind of combine both questions, because they are more or less related. And especially given Violeta's intervention about, having a discussion, having consultations, I'm curious to hear from perhaps the 3 of you, and then we'll come back to you on what do we need for this technology to help us, as in your work, but then how do we make sure that while we make it help us, we also make sure that it continues to be transparent, continues to be accountable, and whether there are any policy recommendations specifically in that direction? Maybe we'll do the same round.
Okay, I'll just add a few points to follow this discussion. I don't know how many, all of you has been spending time on ChatGPT I actually spend a lot of time. To try to find out, there are certain things. For example, generative AI, ChatGPT particularly, it's make a lot of hard works very, very easy. Generate context, synthesize things. The human will take hours, or it makes those tasks so much easy. At the same time, it's so easy for human to understand a piece of text or understand a piece of pattern. ChatGPT is so hard, so stupid, that couldn't get the understanding or couldn't communicate that understanding. Maybe they understood, but it's just not the human way. So for human to know what the thing actually understand. So there's at least for I would consider myself an educated user, that the gap between the algorithm behind those large AI intelligence and ordinary users and even researchers, the gap is still there very considerably, while the implementation is already global. In these cases, when we talk about regulation, regulate what? By what tools? And for what purpose? It's all deserve a serious public discussion in the democratic societies. And I'm watching how this impact to a authoritarian regime, particularly China, which has strict control of the information and the content for their own ideological reasons and insecurity. That this level of AI makes so much things easier to access knowledge and information. It's really fundamentally shaking the censorship regime in China. When the social media just started, we all have the hope that this sort of new kind of communication environment through user-centric communication environment can be freer, can be faster, can be more efficient, and it will bring freedom of information, even collective action into the society, and then the authoritarian regime cannot last in that context. But China proved until now it's the opposite. The social media or internet becoming a greater tool to control. It still have the fact of democratic, a lot of information generation, but it's more worked in advantage of a controller hand. Coming to the AI, will be the same case in the case of China? I actually don't know. I mentioned the cases that right now, there is a possibility if we democratize AI, large language model, that will sabotage the current Chinese government control regime. But they can advance new ones. So if you want to look at the regulation of generative AI, look at China. How they try to licensing those language models by that to put some control on the companies to advance their development. But at the same time, they're running into the dilemma that if Chinese generative AI model is not as good, useful, well then it's already the case. There's a very vibrant black market that Chinese users was circumventing the Great Firewall to use ChatGPT, and it's causing the government great concern. So this is a very fast developing area.
It's fascinating.
All right. So first few topic that I just mentioned, that one is the trust deficit, is that maybe come to the point that on the social media you will meet with that a day, maybe soon, that most of the content probably is generated by machine or with machine, okay? So that come to the point that the people start to realize that, or start to lose their motivation to pursue what is real, authentic content or created by the human. And that's the one problem. And the second problem is that we are perceived that for the elections, right? So we've been already seeing that last year when Putin announced the attack to the Ukraine, and there's a video for Zelensky saying that he's going to surrender. That's a very bad production, and of course be debunked very fast. But that's last year. right? So this technology is improving very, very fast. Not only ChatGPT or language model, but also image, audios, sounds, music, videos, all kind of things. So that's really brought people's concern if there's an election and in a very short amount of time before the voting days and some bad actors using those technology to generate stuff. And then third one is that I don't know if people are aware that a lot of people, like enthusiasts, people who has the enthusiasm into the generative AI, they've been talking about agents, like clone yourself as agents. So you can put this person to running some basic decision making for your company or for your office, for your team. That's also concerning. Another thing that we've been doing is try a little bit is the censorship. So I've been trying the ChatGPT for when it's come up, is that I asked them that there's a bunch of the tweets, and you tell me whether Xi Jinping will like it or not. And it did a very, very good job to predict that if I say Taiwan is a country, Xi Jinping doesn't like it. And if I say something else, it's really like it. So the technology can potentially also be used by autocrats to censorship the information within their content. So come to what to do. I think, I agreed. I think there's inevitable that all kind of aspect we will be using this technology, and it will just change very fast. So I would like to focus on the stuff that the new category that we are categorize the technology which has potential to mislead people at scale. And we should categorize and create a framework and a knowledge language to describe why we need such technology. If the purpose or how we regulate or limit those technology in certain usage, if they can potentially mislead a large amount of people. Let me give you one example. If there's a technology can generate faces, human faces, very authentic, it could be used for what? Right? And it's already inside the ecosystem of the information operation that people you can buy fake accounts, a bunch of fake accounts at once. You can buy a lot of image at once. So it just boosts this ecosystem. So we do need a new language and a new framework. I agree, not just directed to the ChatGPT, but also for the purpose of those technology. And what I'm really looking for is that the community itself can come to their own code of conduct and their own self-regulatory, that what we be seeing in the medical, right? Medical field, if you are talking about clone the real person, there's an ethical problem, there's a peer review, there's a IRB process, but for the computer science and the AI, what is our code of conduct here, and for the ethical use, and to just like our lady from the Microsoft saying that how we boost this technology to use for the good and the democracies.
Code of conduct, it never occurred to me to even consider it in the context of AI and the user's rights. So that's a great point. Perhaps, Eduardo, you would like to give us a few insights.
When you were mentioning this thing about generating images, perfect images, I remember that when I told my students about this, one of them told me, oh, that would have been really great during the pandemic, because instead of a blank page in Zoom, it would be my face looking like if I was listening to you. So I come from a country who has many, many times tried to sort of deal with these issues and failed miserably. Why? Because the world is, and this is my political scientist bias, the world is shaped by power relationships. And one of the things that countries, emerging economies like Peru, have is the fact that we don't have any control over a lot of things. In a globalized economy, it's very difficult to control things that come to the country and start working from, the web on. And while I understand that it would be great to have some kind of self-regulatory body for AI, the one thing I would like to have is an understanding of this is a new area of the economy, of the world economy, that should be incorporated in some negotiation like what used to be the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, the GATT. This is the information economy, digital economy, because it's, I mean, which are the corporations that are controlling this? Basically, the same corporations that have controlled the previous wave of the digital economy. Basically the same. Not Microsoft, of course, is not part of that, but it's the back office of many of those. So it's basically the same. I mean, this is a number of very large corporations with global presence that are working under a number of assumptions and a number of premises that have nothing to do with the interests of the countries of their citizenship, but basically their interests. And that's how capitalism works. And of course, China works differently, and that's why they have the Great Firewall of China and so on. And they are dealing, and I guess they're going to deal somehow with this, even if it doesn't work as good as the old firewall. But that's a political premise, and there's a control that the Chinese government and the Communist Party have over the society, which is not the case in Latin America. We have spent many sessions talking about Latin America in this Forum 2000 conference, saying that the problem in Latin America is that our governments don't have control, don't have the state capabilities to control what they should control. So when you add this new dimension, this new layer of issues, there's another thing that is not going to work. There are going to be wonderful possibilities. And my country lived through that because 15 years ago, there was a government decision to invest a lot of money to buy XO1s, the computers that the OLPC project launched in 2007. Peru bought almost 1 million of those computers, and they were going to revolutionize education. Nothing, absolutely nothing happened, besides spending a lot of money on 1 million computers. All of those are now waste, electronic waste somewhere, because we sort of try to jump the wave and sort of believe the hype. And that's the main issue here. As a whistleblower from Meta said some months ago, to release a new toaster to the market, you need to follow more regulations and to release to the market something like ChatGPT. There's something wrong. There's something wrong with you. A toaster is more regulated than a large language model. Yeah. So Skynet is going to come, and we're going to say, oh, we need regulation for that. Ask a Skynet. And the regulation was going to be, obviously, the elimination of the human race, so to speak. Yeah. So these things shouldn't happen this way. There should be a public good dimension that it has to be global. Because it doesn't work just having the European Union or the United States, which is not going to do anything about this, of course, or the Chinese government trying to decide how this should be developed. This should be a global thing. How, I don't know, but at least we should put it in the agenda. Mm-hmm. Because the world, and it's nothing personal, Violeta, but the world is what every empowered government does. It's not necessarily what the individuals or the communities do. It's whom the power is given, they are going to use it. And one of the ways they use it is to win their own interests, to put their own interests ahead of everybody else. So that's one of the things we shouldn't forget in this case, I think. Sorry if I sound too left-wing or something like that.
No, but it is a race at the end of the day. It is a race among government countries trying to come ahead or win over or do whatever it is that they're trying to do with this technology. Violeta, do you have a couple of words to add, given that Microsoft was mentioned a couple of times?
I did.
So, first of all, it's a great discussion. I would say that Microsoft created the 6 principles of AI in 2018, and the bedrock principle is called accountability. And we were maybe the first ones this year went to Congress and asked for regulation and to fast-track actually the discussions and to come to an agreement. So we are aware of the needs we have as society, as countries, to regulate and to act in a way which is safeguard us, citizens, and use this technology in a safe way. So a couple of principles we are promoting in this Congress hearing we have made, but also we kept a couple of consultations in Brussels as well. The first one is to promote accountability in AI development and deployment. Because this also means that people who are developing and deploying these systems must remain accountable to everyone else. So I think this is very important. We are not yet there, I would say. But I am confident and positive we can work towards this direction. The second one is about breaks. And let me explain this. AI is not the first time societies have confronted a valuable new technology that has also potential to harm us if it fails. And history has many examples in this respect. For instance, the growth of cities led to have taller buildings. Taller buildings brought the necessity to have elevators. And initially, people were afraid to kind of utilize the elevators because the cables won't actually hold, and the elevator will kind of fall down, and they will get injured. And what was introduced by Otis, actually, by Alicia Otis, introduced the brake on the cables. So if something goes wrong, then the whole the people inside the elevator won't get hurt. So moving forward, I really believe that we should have brake type of controls for AI, which is actually managing and controlling critical infrastructure. You can't apply the same level of rules to everything, because I think it's not feasible. And the third point I wanted to make, I believe that the regulatory framework should map the technology architecture of AI. What I mean by that, imagine a stack. I know there are different ways to explain this. I would take a simple way. So you have the application layer, the model layer, and the infrastructure layer. And then the regulation should address each one of these layers, because AI is powering all of them. And it's very important to understand your infrastructure. It's very important to understand the exposure and the potential risks. And there is a principle which actually was a lot promoted by Microsoft, which is zero trust principle. Whenever you are building digital systems, you need to think from holistic perspective, so you can kind of predict potentially negative outcomes, so you can protect the system, protect the beneficiaries of the system. And this actually requires, this is why I was saying that it requires leadership and parties coming together, because it's not a simple answer. In order to really address application, model, which is like the trained models of AI, and then infrastructure, which usually is cloud, but not only. So I believe that we have certain experience given the cloud adoption in our space, and we can take some learnings from there. We also have different principles which are applied, and we also have the common law, which is saying that whenever you are driving something which creates harm, then you are accountable for it. So we are not completely in an unregulated space. ChatGPT at this point is rather a end consumer type of tool. Whenever you are operating in an enterprise space or in a regulated industry space, you can regulate the way you are utilizing the large language models. It's not like you are using the ChatGPT. And for people who are kind of leading enterprises, you know that you can have your own tenant, your own environment, and that your information is actually not used for training models. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, lots of really good, interesting suggestions. Of course, accountability, definitely something that we've been talking about. But break approach is really fascinating to me, and also what I'm hearing for the first time in the conversation around AI. So we have about 6 minutes until I'm told that we have to take a hard end to this panel. And I was hoping that maybe we take at least one question. Can I ask the organizers if they approve? Can we do at least one question? Yeah? Yeah, maybe? Yes. We already have a hand up. Do I give this to you? Let's not risk. I can. Ooh.
I just want to make sure that no students want to ask a question instead of me, because I would gladly cede that to them if there's only one. But in the absence of that, I'll ask a question. So this is a pretty basic question about what the recent past tells us about the likely future as it relates to this advanced technology. And I think if you look at the experience with social media, for example, and the way in which the convenience that it affords actually has led to enormous pathologies in our societies, that's at a certain level that all the things you've been describing relating to advanced uses of artificial intelligence-driven technology suggests this may be orders of magnitude more powerful and move more quickly using images rather than text, for example. So what is it about the future that will minimize the pathologies associated with convenience on the one hand, and also suggest why these future technologies or the technologies that are upon us will be more transparent? Because the lack of transparency, not understanding how these are driven, the algorithms behind them, have also been fundamental to the downsides of the technology of the last 20 years. So I'd just be curious for why the future is likely to be different and better than the last 20 years.
I don't think it's going to be better. But I like your approach to this question. Who would like to take it?
Let me comment on it. That I think social media, I already mentioned, as a citizens or users from a company's point of view, I think in very much people are very naive about it. We see the convenience it provides, and we see the potential of democratic-sized communication. But we didn't see the coming, which is the economic force behind of the market economy that makes, in the end, become a very centralized enterprises. We end up Facebook and Twitter, just few companies' hand, and that kind of concentration of the platform creating a number of issues because the company has its own interest agenda, not necessarily always aligned with public interest, etc. And on the AI, we are in the same situation. Not just, we have, fortunately, have you with us, and congratulate Microsoft, which is funding the OpenAI as a leading player right now in this generative AI wave. But then there are several large companies that are going with it. And again, it's a very centralized, concentrated competition environment. And left the regulation, citizens and public, and all the potential sort of regulatory desires behind of this technology development. This is a very much reality we're facing. How to, if we don't shift this reality, I think we'll end up probably in a greater scale of our situation with social media. While we have all this great usage of the social media, and we see the negative impact to our public life and to our individual mental health, et cetera, can some kind of a regulation or public discussion together with companies, together with technology researchers, developers, to counter this sort of almost by default capitalist economic factor that things will generate into the one concentration side of it. Can we, that's what I mean by democratize the AI development. Can we have more smaller models, more competitors, more diverse eco-environment, which may be much healthier for the benefit of usage of AI?
I can respond a little bit. So,
try to please.
Yeah,
keep
very
it
quick.
short.
So, yes, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, they are a big player, but also there's an open source language model or generative AI are invented and be trying very hard from the community. And for that, I think that's we will see another vibrant ecosystem that you have the different type of uses and from different way. And I think there's the bright side I'm seeing, if I must, is that I think this time just our bad actors or those people who try to utilize the technology to control people, they are way behind for the free world who is doing the technology and try freely exploring the technology and what's the possibility right now. So we are more ahead for them to them. So I think that's maybe some chance there we can figure it out right now. Yeah.
Extremely briefly, I remember many years ago people said that the internet was made of cats because everything you found in the internet was cats. But actually, it wasn't cats. It was a bunch of feral wild cats trying to, I mean, all these platforms and so on. I feel like AI is sort of a bunch of Tyrannosaurus rexes or velociraptors going around, and we are not noticing it. I don't think it can be contained. That's the main point.
I just want to say that there is, I don't know what future holds, first of all. If I would share. But I choose to believe in a better future, and also I choose to think how I can contribute to a better future. And if each and every person on the planet would do this, I think we would be in a better place. For instance, I chose to dedicate time to mentor people because the pathologies around social media came also from education, from, let's say, family values, from attention, from self-confidence, from having understanding of who you are, where you go, why you are going there. So investing in education and awareness, I think it will help us to be in a better place. And actually playing a role. I think we need not to be spectators of this. Government would do. I don't know if government would do, but we are like 8 billion people. If we don't believe that we can have and make a difference in the world, then maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe we can make a difference.
Well, on that note, a very optimistic note, very different to how I envision all of this and the future. I would like to thank my panelists with their input, and also, I guess, I was trying to summarize how do I wrap this conversation, because we mentioned so many things, but I think for me the takeaways are the democratizing AI, or at least trying to develop models for this idea. Of course, holistic view, both for those who are using on the user's end, but also on the developer's end. And hopefully, you know, there are more good actors than there are bad actors in the business. The intention, of course, but also the code of conduct. That was also one of my personal takeaways. Thank you so much for sharing your very interesting thoughts about this. Thank you, the audience, for coming. And yeah, we'll see what the future holds.
Thanks.